Shares of Canopy Growth higher today as a Canadian cannabis company announces a $3.4 billion deal for the rights to acquire Acreage Holdings. The deal will take effect after either marijuana is legalized federally in the United States or if there are exchange rule changes. We are joined now exclusively by Bruce Linton, the founder and CEO of Canopy Growth. Kevin Murphy is Acreage Holdings founder and CEO. And we are glad and happy to have you both here on a day like today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
This is a very unusual deal, and this is probably because it's a very unusual industry that is sort of handcuffed by the fact that the business is not federally legal in the United States. So, Bruce, can you tell me sort of the backstory, how this deal came together? Because the template of the deal is extremely important in terms of getting this deal done and what this could mean for future M&A.
Right. So we wanted at Canopy to have access to the U.S., but we also wanted to be able to stay on NYSE. We wanted the big banks to keep working with us, and we wanted Constellation to be on side to keep their money in. And so what we had to do is find a structure where we didn't put cash into the company, but instead we bought the right from shareholders to set a purchase exchange ratio today, meaning if we make everything double, they make twice as much. So that's why Kevin and I have to work together in terms of us lending down some of our trademarks, our knowledge, his team executing the way they have, and seeing the cost of capital come down. So it's a structure where we're basically buying a right, and when it becomes federally permissible, or we feel comfortable that it wouldn't cause us to be offside with those prior parties, we move.
The prior parties meaning the exchanges, for instance, so they wouldn't say to you, hey, we have to delist you because you're embarking in a business that's federally illegal.
Right, because Canopy's doing business all around the globe. Right. And when I show up in a country and I want them to glom onto us as the best choice, we don't talk about dank Kush, we talk about NYSE and why Deloitte was our auditor to start. And so these elements of credibility really help win over regulators.
So part of the deal is an upfront payment to shareholders, Kevin, to your shareholders, $300 million, and then you set a peg in terms of what each Acreage share is worth compared to Canopy stock. Right now, it's not trading up to that full price of the bid. And in other deals, that would be interpreted as there are questions as to whether or not this deal will get done. What can you tell shareholders about that?
Well, I think given the fact that the structure itself is so complex and so new, I think that investors need to understand exactly what it's about. Many investors earlier today said, geez, Murphy, you might have sold out too soon. Not true. It's my job as the CEO of this company to be a fiduciary for my shareholders. That means capping the downside, hedging the downside, but maximizing the upside. And as Bruce pointed out, we've agreed to a ratio. And if you combine the biggest player in the United States with the biggest player in Canada and abroad, then it's the 1 + 1 = 4 or 5. We're the bellwether for the industry, and as well as Canopy does, we do, and vice versa. And that's really the thought behind the strategic line.
The issue of whether or not the States Act will pass is an important one, even for this deal. And I understand that you guys have told me that it doesn't matter if it passes or not, but it is important because right now it's not passed. And right now your competitors do not have the kind of access to capital that Kevin may have now with Canopy stock as a currency. So what are you going to do right now? You walk out of this building, who are you calling? Who are you shopping for?
So we walk out of the building, we have a plan between now and the shareholder vote. So it's called 60 days.
Okay.
And what we do is we map out everywhere where Acreage is operating, all of the brands, know-how we have, and say, how do we license this down so you can make the most of the next 18 to 36 months until it does pass? And if it doesn't pass, well, we're still going to make the most of the next 18 to 36 months, and we're going to keep dominating. And the outcome will be somebody's behind us, but we can't see them.
So, and that seems to be the point where you keep talking about the structure. So this structure is what everybody in the industry has been waiting for. And at some level, have you guys just lit a fire under the entire, and does that mean that every multinational from every other jurisdiction who's wanted to buy in, has the same concerns you do, Bruce, as a company that's listed on U.S. exchanges, has to deal with U.S. banks, is now licking their chops and saying, thanks very much for doing our work for us? Well, we're coming.
I think they're going to do that. And the good news is there's only one Acreage. So good luck with the others sometimes. Yep. Right. So part of the reason we always move first is you get to pick. Part of the reason Constellation, when they bought into us, right, we were the most costly cannabis company to take a piece in. But there's a big value for quality. Big value because we're not governing them, right? When we do this, Kevin and his team are executing. They're going to continue to have a great board and great governance. And we know that with all the tools we give them and I'll call it the instincts of the company, they're going to go and crush it. And we're not going to have to go, oh boy, what have we done? The others who follow in, they might get a bit of that, oh boy.
And we should be clear that you vetted this with so many parties between lawyers, the exchanges, regulators, et cetera. So this has really been squared away from your standpoint. But in terms of Constellation's role in this whole thing,
yep.
How much of a driving force had they been in choosing the target? How do you get their money, basically, to Acreage to do deal? I mean, how should we think about this in terms of how active a U.S. Company is in the U.S. cannabis market?
They have been very enthusiastic that we found a path to do what we've done in the U.S. And the way we did it, obviously their shareholders thought was quite smart as well, because their stock got a great day. Yep. Because what we did is we structured some of their warrants. They're taking a potentially dilutive event and using it into an extended window to pay off what they might buy in. And because they're so strong in the U.S., down the road, maybe Kevin and I end up working together because of the laws changing, and we're trying to use distributors that maybe today they only distribute alcohol. I wonder if Constellation has any ability to help with that. Things like this is their home turf, and so the enthusiasm be there, great, but they had to approve the deal. They had to review it all. They, of course, knew your team because they've been keeping an eye, but it really was sort of a Canopy-driven, Constellation-supported activity.
Last quick question, and that is, now who do you view your competitors to be? Because feasibly, you've just opened the door for big pharma, consumer products companies, you name it, to use this structure as a template to do deals in the United States.
So I think all of the credible actors will want to follow. And I think that the things that we have done and will do will make them continue to follow, but it doesn't mean they lead. You know, this is not something you just step in and take out on and you've figured out how to make APIs and run clinical research. Like, part of the reason we're together is we've already begun that for several years. We're already in the phase 2B trial. So if we can actually help your sleep habits or help your grandparents or your dog, all of that research conveys down to Acreage as we enter a window when FDA can take those results.
Is William Well going to step aside as he's embarking on his pursuit of the presidency?
We'll talk about that probably in another segment,
all right.
but
wondering.
We love Bill Weld and the rest of the group.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, guys. Thank you so much. It's so great to have you here. There are a couple of snags with the Squawk Box interview, but we're glad to have you here on Fast Money. It's great.
Longest have been here.
Longest drum roll ever.
Bruce Linton and Kevin Murphy, we appreciate it. Tim Seymour, I'm curious. You first hear news of this deal. What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, first of all, the U.S. multi-state operators are going to all be bid, right? So the big boys, GTI, who was on the show last night, or Cresco Labs, or some of the smaller guys like TerraSyn. I mean, it's an environment where you've got an argument. U.S. assets are very cheap, and there's an avenue for companies to come in here. And you talked about it. I mean, I think big pharma, I think big consumer products. I mean, some of the companies we talked about tonight, Procter & Gamble. I mean, if they want to be, and I'm not saying Procter's coming in tomorrow, but they have a legal apparatus for getting here now and having an option. By the way, it's an option.
Sure.
It should come in, and makeup companies should be coming in. There should be Estee Lauder coming in. There should be a whole host of other people coming in. But what do you do with this? You buy up any name that you know.
You sold Kronos, though, right?
So I sold it, but what did I say the other night? That these things are starting to look attractive. They sold off aggressively, and unfortunately, I missed it by about a day. So I think that you're still going to have time, because a lot of these names still were read today. So I think you should be a buyer of any name that you know in the cannabis
Bruce
space.
mentioned it, Constellation Brands. You look at it, 20 times forward earnings, declining business, to say you can't buy the stock. But they're so far ahead of the curve on this. And now you see that the investments they made, I mean, again, they're 2 years ahead of everybody else. So you get long Constellation Brands on the fact that they had vision, the fact that the stock is probably not as expensive as it looks like, and it's been telling you now for the last couple of weeks that they like what they see.
I think the pure plays are going to be the companies that Tim mentioned here. I think we're going to look back at this deal and say this was the moment that the mergers and acquisitions and the consolidation of the space, particularly in the U.S., started to take off. So I think you've got a huge runway here to just allocate to this space.